PlayMaker is super awesome, and I want to tell you about it. It is a visual scripting plugin for Unity, similar to Unity's own visual scripting tool that's built into the more recent versions of Unity. It's also similar to Blueprint, if you've heard of that. That's Unreal's visual scripting tool. It also happens to be the way I make Of Love and Eternity playable. Otherwise, it would just be artwork. Without having any code background or anything like that, I can make the game function with scripting. There's a lot of other visual scripting plugins on the Unity Asset Store, and you can kind of compare them to PlayMaker in the way that they use like little modules that you string together to create logic, and then all that is applied to your assets in the game when you hit the run button. I guess the differences between all these different types are something you're going to have to look up because I don't have a lot of experience with these other ones. When I first heard about PlayMaker, it was the first visual scripting plugin that I had known about. And so I just jumped right in and I kind of committed to it. So you can go that route or you can do your research. There's a few other ones out there. They all have their own little nuances and their own ways of handling logic and stuff that might be better suited for the way you think. In the case of PlayMaker, it has a system called the FSM system, which stands for Functional State Machines. And you can kind of think of we'll go into these later, but you can kind of think of those as little machines of logic that sit in your scene and just do what you tell them to do. And it's all based off stringing together logic, like I mentioned before. So yeah, you'll come to get to know it by watching this, and maybe you can use it as a comparison. Maybe you can follow along and just go right in on it. It's a paid plugin, so that might be a prohibitive part to this. You might just want to go and jump into Unity's built-in visual scripting thing. I think either way, this will be a nice thing to watch just to understand what visual scripting is and just the way you can code your project without actually touching any code. Why I love it is a little note I have here, why I love PlayMaker. Because when I first went solo, I was feeling pretty intimidated by learning code. I was having trouble like just looking at the code on screen. It was like making me feel like my eyes are going to die sooner and I'd need glasses and stuff. So when I heard about PlayMaker and I actually started looking into it, it was kind of a relief. Like, oh, there's another option. I can still do solo dev without hurting my eyes. And it's actually kind of easy to learn, and there's a lot of resources and stuff out there to help learning. So I ended up gravitating towards it just out of curiosity because it was just something new that I'd never heard about before. And it was kind of a promise that I could make games of my own, and that was really exciting. I actually don't think I even would have approached solo game dev as wholeheartedly as I did without it, just because of the barrier of spending years learning code. I'll never discourage learning code because I think there's a lot of like gaps in my know-how and problems with my own game that I can't resolve with PlayMaker or with just PlayMaker, that I think code would have resolved all that stuff. So definitely, if you have a mind for it and you're okay learning code, you could learn both of these things. You could do code on the side or PlayMaker on the side and focus on either one of these, and you'll just be better off for it because there are like weaknesses, and maybe you'll be able to pick up on those as I show you the program to using PlayMaker. You can get by doing just about everything with PlayMaker, but there's definitely a lot of more advanced things that you can only ever do with code, like really nitty-gritty stuff and advanced systems and all sorts of stuff. So it's not a catch-all, but it's definitely going to get your game moving. So that's something to consider there. Another reason why I really like it is because when I first started learning, it was just kind of clicking with me. It just worked. And it was easy to learn and it was quick to learn. It's also kind of helped by the fact that there's a nice online community and there's a lot of resources and stuff for PlayMaker specifically. And that just kind of facilitated this quick learning. I think just after a few months of messing with it on smaller scale projects that I just kind of invented for myself to learn, I wasn't feeling limited by my skills. I was feeling limited just by my creativity, which was a really cool feeling. It felt like kind of the sky's the limit sort of thing. So yeah, it just opened up a lot of doors. It made Of Love and Eternity possible at all. And it makes me feel super confident just being a solo developer that I have the ability to create anything really. With some reservations, obviously, like learning code, I'll always recommend it because there's some points that I've reached with my game where I have to like call on the aid of an actual programmer. But it'll only be positive to learn PlayMaker if you're just getting started, because I think it'll really accelerate things if you want to get your game playable. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to call it a tutorial, but it's really just me talking and showing you around. So it's like a show and tell sort of. I want you to go in with like a general understanding of Unity. I feel like you'll be lost if you don't know what certain things are, like what game objects are, how the camera is, where the scene is, stuff like that. So just a general cursory knowledge of Unity will be helpful. And also, I'm not going to show how to install PlayMaker. It's going to be dependent on the version of PlayMaker that you have. So it's going to be different from my old Unity. So it's basically just installing a plugin as you install any other plugin. So you get it on the store and you click the install button and it'll appear in your project if you import it. So yeah, those are the things I'd like you to know before we jump in. I think that will make things a little smoother. And lastly, for this intro, I'm just going to quickly go over what we're going to go over. So I have 3 bullet points here. We're just going to check out the interface. I'm going to give you an example or two of some scripting, how to script the objects and stuff. And then I'm going to show you the online resources I was talking about. Anyway, those are the things we're going to get into. So why wait? Let's jump right in. So I have a brand new project here and I've already installed PlayMaker. You won't really notice much of a difference once you've imported the plugin, other than some new folders in your project and this new toolbar option up here called PlayMaker. So to actually get started, you need to set up your workspace to have the editor windows. So we're just going to click on PlayMaker. It's going to drop down and we'll open the PlayMaker editor first. And it might pop up with these things. I don't know. I'm just going to make it not show those again. So yeah, you'll get the PlayMaker editor right here. I usually dock it right on the bottom. It kind of reads a little better if it's kind of this horizontal layout here. So I just dock it down here with these other things. And that way you get a nice scene view and then you can have a nice workspace down here with the PlayMaker stuff. And the next window that we'll need is the action window. So we're going to go back up to the PlayMaker drop down here, go to editor windows, and there's a bunch of different windows here. We're not going to get into any of them other than action browser. This is the other fundamental one that you'll need. So we'll click that. This one is more of a vertical layout because it lists all your actions, and we'll get into that in just a second. And I usually dock that off to the side here because it kind of reads better in this vertical layout. And so yeah, this is kind of how I have my scene set up usually, so that I have a nice scene view. This drop-down list is here. My scene hierarchy is above here, and then I have my project just below here. You can have it, I mean, obviously you can just put it however you like, but this I feel like takes better advantage of the space, and you don't really need much more than that anyway. So yeah, now we're all set to start using PlayMaker. Now, as a quick demonstration of what these windows are actually doing, I'm going to start by adding a cube to the scene. This is just so I have an object to screw around with as an example to show. So I added a cube, and there it is in my scene. Let's see what it looks like. It's kind of small, so I'm going to make it bigger here. That's good. Maybe rotate it so we can tell what we're looking at. There, so we have a cube. In PlayMaker, the way you actually make scene objects do what you want them to do, you have to add an FSM. I think I mentioned FSM in the intro. I took a few takes, so I don't know what I actually talked about. But an FSM stands for Functional State Machine, and that's how you get things to do things through PlayMaker. So just for an example, I'm going to click on the cube, and with that selected, I can come down into the PlayMaker editor, and in this empty space here where it says right-click to add FSM, I'm going to do just that. I'm going to right-click and add FSM. And that does a couple things. You might get a little warning down here that it's added certain features into the scene to make PlayMaker function. You don't have to worry too much about that stuff. It added this PlayMaker GUI. I'm just going to put it over here. I won't really get into that. It's not super necessary for getting started. It added that, but more importantly, you'll see on your cube, or on my cube anyway, it created this little icon, and that means it's now a PlayMaker object with an FSM on it. So if I go into my inspector over here, I have my inspector mounted over here where the action browser is too, just because it also reads really well vertically. You can see one of the components is now a PlayMaker FSM script. And so that means we can start scripting. Another thing you might notice is in this formerly empty space, we now see a start and a state here in our FSM. And that is kind of the foundation of getting things to do things when we hit the play button. So I'll just show you right now really quickly. If I hit play now, you'll see this first state lights up green, and that means anything we want to happen in this state will be happening now. And right now, nothing is happening because we haven't added any actions. But as an example, I'm gonna stop play and go over to the action browser menu again. This is that big list of actions. You have options to do just about anything you'd ever want to with a Unity game object. in this list. So I think learning the terminology here is going to be the biggest hurdle. But if you have an objective in mind and you know what you're going to want to happen, you can easily find this stuff using the search bar up here. So I think just as an example, I'm going to make this cube rotate when we play. This is going to be kind of a very simple example. So I type rot, and I should be able to find rotate, some sort of rotate. There's a bunch of different options here. We have I-tween rotations, we have set rotations, and this is just going to be taking a little bit of experimentation for you to understand what all these mean. For the most basic example, I think I'm just going to go down to this transform section here and click this rotate action. And when you click different actions, you actually get a little preview of what the action looks like. And it comes with a little description as well. So if we see this rotate, it says rotate a game object around each axis using a vector3 variable and or X, Y, Z component. To leave any axis unchanged, set the variable to none. It kind of reads like a rule for a magic card or something, right? So you can kind of picture these as like little cards that just have abilities or do certain abilities on the state that you're in. And so if you look at this kind of grayed out preview, you can see we have options for the game object using a vector3. We can also use the X, Y, and Z axes, so we can influence all these different things while we're in this state. And there's other options there we'll get into in a second. So you can click and drag into this state space over here in the PlayMaker editor, or you can just click on a state over here and then double click on your action in the action browser and it'll pop in there. So now when we hit the play button, instead of doing nothing, it's going to do whatever we tell it to do with this little rotate script here. Let's get started with the first little variable here. It says GameObject, and it's already pre-filled with use owner. And that just means whoever owns this FSM, in our example, the cube, it's going to be applying this rotation script to that object. And so that's kind of what we want. Another option we could do is specify the game object. If we wanted this rotate script to affect a different object in the scene, we can specify. So we can click that, and we're giving a little game object variable field we can fill in with whatever we like. So I'll just drag and drop the main camera in there, and now would be affecting the main camera. But I actually don't want that to happen, so I'm going to go back to use owner. And now we get an option below that for a vector3 variable. And if you're not familiar with what a vector3 variable is, or any other variable for that matter, I can quickly go through a couple of them in a bit. But basically a vector3 is 3 variables in one. So it's going to be basically a combination of this X, Y, and Z in one single variable. So you have an option to use that. I'm just going to use the Y variable here. So I'm just going to click this little use variable button here, and that'll give me an option to manually input a variable here. Basically what I've done here now is I've taken our owner, the game object, and I'm going to tell it that every frame, because this little checkbox is checked, it's going to rotate 1 on the Y axis. I don't know if that's going to be fast or slow, but we can easily test that by hitting the play button now. Let's see how quickly or slowly it rotates. Okay. Oh, okay. Pretty okay pace there. Looks a little like a loading screen for a PlayStation 1 game or something. So yeah, that's doing exactly what we told it to do. It's taking the game object. Every frame, it's rotating by 1 on the Y axis. Okay, so I'm going to stop play now. And at this point, I think it'd be kind of nice for you to just mess around with all these options in here just to see what happens. You might already be able to understand how changing the X axis and the Z axis as well would affect the rotation, but doing the per second and every frame, toggling those on and off just to see what happens might be kind of nice to learn. Also looking up like per second and every frame are things that happen while Unity is running, no matter what program you're using or what plugin you're using. So you can look up that sort of syntax in the Unity documentation online. In fact, a lot of the terminology that you'll see in here or in any of the actions are going to be linked directly to the syntax that Unity uses. So you'll actually start to learn a little bit of vocabulary there as you explore PlayMaker itself. It's not too far removed from the engine itself. And a lot of the documentation for Unity will actually come into play while you're learning. So keep those bookmarked, keep the Unity documentation and the manual and stuff bookmarked while you're learning PlayMaker. So that's all fine and dandy, but what if we wanted more to happen? So the next thing I think that'd be nice to learn is actually how to use multiple states in one FSM to do different things. For this example, I'm going to make the cube stop rotating when you hit a button. or a key to be specific. And to do that, we'll need another state. So let's right click in this little space here, this empty space, and you can click Add State. So now we have another state. Oh yeah, you can click and move these around, and if you hold Control, it'll lock to a grid. That's kind of nice if you have OCD like me. You want to have everything aligned. In this second state, I'm going to move between when I press a key down to stop the cube. And so it's basically like switching back and forth between these two upon key press. So to sort of simplify it, we're going to leave this state as the cube is rotating state. And this one is going to be the state we're in when the cube is no longer rotating. So let's just name these. You can click on the state, and up here you'll see a title. And I'm just going to fill this in, rotate, and stop for these two states. To actually travel between these two states, we need something called an event. So let's make one over here to the right side of the PlayMaker editor in this tab called Events. And down here, I'm just going to type key down and hit enter. And then that's it. I've made an event. What you can do with these events is actually put them underneath these states here. So under the rotate one, because I want to move between rotate and stop, I'm going to put our event, the new event, by right clicking, going to add transition and key down, and you'll see it pop up beneath this state here. Now what you do with this is you connect it to the state you want to travel to. So key down, when I press a key down, it's going to go to the stop state here. So I just clicked down and dragged it over and connected this state here. Now to actually get this state to transition to the other state, we have to add in a new action, and I believe it's called get key down. Yeah, so I just searched in the search window here, get key down. I'm going to click on this, and if we go down here, we can see that little description down here sends an event. We just created an event when a key is pressed. So it's pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to make a little more room here, make sure I'm on the rotate state, and I'm just going to double click on get key down. So let's decide on what key we want. This is going to be the first variable. And it gives you like this clumsy list of keys. So the regular keys are down here. Let's just make it the S key for stop. So I'm going to click S there, and now we can see that the S key is set as this variable. I think in newer versions of PlayMaker, if you've got a newer version, you'll probably get a less clumsy list because this is a little ridiculous. I think they fixed this at some point. It's just my version has this list. And then the next variable we get to choose is which event to send. So drop down and we'll see our key down event in there. Any event that we put on that state is going to show up here. So key down. Okay, so now that that's all set up, I'm going to hit play again and we'll see a familiar sight. It's going to be rotating, but then I'm going to hit the S key here. See how it moved, the green moved between the rotate to the stop, and then our cube actually stopped because while in this state, we have nothing going on in the state tab here. There's no actions or anything happening here. So that's cool. We're kind of stuck there now because if I keep hitting S, nothing more will happen because we're not telling it to do anything more. So I'm going to unplay. And I suppose from the stop state, we want to get another key that I can press to send it back to the rotate state. So I'm going to go into the stop state. I'm going to get another key down. I'm going to select this action, put it in here. And I guess I'm just going to keep it the same, the S key. We're going to send the very same event that we made before, key down. When I click that, you'll see this red appear. It says this state doesn't have this transition. We can either add it manually like we did before by right-clicking the state and adding transition key down, or we can just click this red thing, which is kind of just a nice hotkey, to quickly add that event. And so now that that event is all set, we can click on it and drag back to rotate. And now we'll have this nice little loop that when I keep hitting S, it'll jump back and forth between these two states. So I'm going to hit play. We're rotating. I'm going to hit S. We jump to stop. It does nothing but wait to get key down. I'm going to give it the S key, and it's going to go back to rotating. So now we're free to go back and forth between these two states. So to add a little bit more to this and give you an example of the freedom that you have with the PlayMaker editor here, we're going to add another functionality to this very same FSM. I'm going to make it so that when you press a different key down, it's going to shrink down the cube. And then when you let go of the key, it's going to go back to its normal size. So we'll have both the functionality of stopping it from rotating and shrinking up and down. Just to show you how you can get multiple events in here. So I'm going to go back over to events. And since I'm going to be doing another key for this, I want to rename our original one. And you can just click it and rename it. So I'm going to rename this one to S key down. so that we know that the S key is what's controlling the rotation and the stop rotation. And I'm going to add another one, and I guess I'm just going to make it the space bar key. And because I want to scale back up when I've let go of the space key, I'm going to also add another event here called space key up. Because if you look over here, we have an option, an action here to detect when the key comes up as well. So that's different between this toggle back and forth where we have to actively press down the S key each time. This one, the space key, is going to control upon pressing down and pressing up. It's going to switch between the states, so it won't behave like a toggle. So now that we have the space key event, I'm going to add it to this first state here, the rotate state. I'm going to add it, space key down. It's going to add a new event to this same state. So now I can have the option to travel between get S key down to stop, and it's going to go from space key down when we hit the space bar to a different state. To quickly make states from events that we have here, you can hold down the control key and click and drag on the event, and it'll bring that little arrow out. And then when you release, it'll create a new state. And that's like a little shortcut you can use. So this is going to be shrink, because I'm going to shrink the cube when we go into this state. And from here, when we lift back up on the space key, so space key up, I'm going to select that. It's going to go back into this state. So every time I press down on the space key, it's going to jump here where I'm going to control the size of the cube. And then when I lift back up on the space bar, it's going to jump back to rotate. So to do that, we need another get key down, and we're going to have to search for the space key. Hopefully it's somewhere nearby here. Yeah, it's on the top here. So instead of the S key, I'm going to do the space key, and we're going to send our space key down event. And then over in the shrink state, I'm going to get key up instead. So we're going to select the space key, and then it's going to send space key up event. And that way we can switch back and forth when I hold and release the space bar. And we can just test that out by hitting play. So we're in our rotate state. I'm going to press down on the space key. We're going to hang out in here while I'm holding the space key. And then when I release, it should go back just like that. So I'm going to stop play, and I'm going to go in the shrink state and find a way to scale down the cube while we're in this state. And that's usually set scale or set something, usually controls those types of variables. So we have set scale, and this will control the scale of a game object, and we have options to choose between the different axes to control. So that's one way we can do it. Another way you can control variables on a game object is actually by going into the inspector here. I'm going to do it this way just as a reference point because we've already done it through the action browser. I'm going to click the inspector. I'm going to make sure my cube is clicked. And in here, you can see all the different components that a cube game object is made of. So we have the mesh, we have the collider, we have the renderer, and we have the PlayMaker script here. And all that kind of contributes to what this object is in the scene. It starts as just an empty point in space, and it's given these different components to control kind of what the object actually is. So in here, we can actually take any of these components, click, and drag them into our FSM over here in the state space here. And since I want to control the scale, I'm going to go up to this transform component. And as you can kind of see, this is what's controlling the different attributes of the cube's transform. So we have position, rotation, and scale. So I'm going to click on transform and just drag it down into this empty space here in the PlayMaker editor and release. And it's going to give us these options here, get or set property. Since I'm holding down the space key here, I want to set the scale to a certain value. So I'm going to click set property, and it's going to give us these options here. And we can select any property on the transform component on the cube to whatever we like. So I'm going to click this drop down and we'll see all the different properties that exist on this cube. This is, I guess this is a little advanced, but sometimes I use this as like a quick shortcut. So let's do a little browse here. We want to control the scale. So we're going to find the scale in here. It's not rotation, it's not position, it's the local scale. And I'm just going to use a vector 3. We can select X, Y, and Z if we wanted to just do individual axes, but I'm going to do all three at once. So I'm going to click vector 3, and it's going to give us this value here. It's going to relate to this scale value up here in the inspector for the cube. And I'm just going to scale it down. Right now it's at 4.3, just about, because I scaled it up a little bit. So I'm going to scale it down to 2. I'm just going to type 2 in the X and in the Y and in the Z. And I imagine that when I go into this state, it's going to just pop down to this size and stay there. So let's test that out. Hit play. It's going to rotate. I'm going to hit the space bar. I'm going to hold it down, and our cube shrank. When I release it though, it will continue spinning, but it's not going to scale back up because we're not telling it to scale back. We're only telling it to scale down. So I'm going to release. So it keeps spinning, although it's tiny now. And I want to fix that. I actually want to scale back up to its original scale. So I'm going to pause. And while it's in the start state here, we're going to just set it to its current scale. I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to click and drag on the transform component, throw it into the rotate state, set property. I'm going to find local scale, vector 3, and I'm just going to copy this value. Actually, you know what? I'm going to round this down to 4. And that way we just have a clean value to use in here. So I'm going to fill this out as 4, and it should just return to this when we jump back and forth between the shrink and rotate states. So let's test that. I'm pretty confident it's going to rotate, scale down, and when I release, it's going to pop back and continue to rotate. And also, I guess it's like stops spinning when we go into the state, which kind of, I don't know, maybe we want it to continue spinning while it's in the shrink state. So we could have that happen too, because we already have a stop on its own if I hit the S key. And when I hit the space bar, it's stopping. So actually, let me fix that. There's nothing wrong with it because it's not really, we're not doing anything. It's just a little example, but let's just, for the sake of teaching you how to do this, if you want to just copy actions between two different states, for example, this rotate action here, I can just right click it, copy a selected action. You can do Control C as well, and then go into the shrink state and paste it in there, paste action. And it'll be in the shrink state now, so it'll continue to rotate even while it's in the shrink state. So that might look a little nicer. Let's try it. I'm going to play, and as I click, it shrinks down, but it keeps spinning. I think that just looks a little nicer. And then we can also stop it. The last thing I want to go over using this example are variables. Basically, we use variables to modify values during gameplay. So for example, what I want to do here is increase and decrease the speed of the cube's rotation while we're in play mode. We can kind of do that now if we click play and come down to this variable, the Y angle variable, and scrub it up and down to adjust the speed. And also if we go negative, we can go in reverse. But we don't have this ability to do this in the application when it's not in the editor. This is just something that we can do in PlayMaker. To actually access these values during gameplay, we need to create a variable. So up here on the top right, you can see next to the events tab is the variable tab. If I click that, we can start adding in our variables so that we can access those numbers during gameplay. So down here at the bottom of the variables tab, you'll see a little input field here to create a new variable. And you also get another drop-down option here to choose the variable type. It starts off by default as a float, and in fact that's the variable type that we need to control the y-axis as a float value. But if you click this anyway, just as an example, you can see all the different types of variables that there are. So there's floats, integers, bools, GameObject, strings, and so on. As you get to know Unity and as you get to know PlayMaker, you'll start to understand what these variables mean. For now, we're just going to focus on the float variable here. So I'm going to click that. And down here, I'm going to name this variable float underscore y-axis and hit enter. And now we've created our float variable. And the name of this variable is up to you. I just do a prefix of float or whatever the variable type is just to make it easier to find in the list here. But you can really do whatever you want there for your naming conventions. But now that we have this created, I'm going to implement it into our FSM. So I'm going to back over to the state tab, make sure I'm in the rotate state. And I'm going to change this predefined 1 variable to our new variable. And so to do that, we want to go back to the drop-down list instead of this entry field by clicking this button here. And then we can click down and we'll find our float variable. And I'm going to click that, and that'll take the place of that 1 that we had before. I'm also going to go down to the shrink state here because we have that same action here, the rotate one. And I'm also going to replace that with our new variable as well. So having a variable also helps if you want the same value in multiple different actions, because now you don't have to go and individually change these things. When you update the one variable over here, it's going to update throughout the entire FSM or wherever you're using that variable. Okay, so I also want to show you something else here. I'm just going to go back to the rotate state here. And if you want to see what value the variables have or some more information about each of these variable inputs, you can click on the debug toggle here, this little checkbox, and it'll show you what value is actually going to be applied to this field. our new float variable for the y-axis by default was set to 0. So now we see that 0 down there. And you can just see that by toggling that on and off. It just shows you what's down there. I kind of want it to start rotating already when we hit play. So I'm going to go back to the variable tab again and just change this back to 1. And if I jump back to the state, you can see that that value has updated here. And at the same time has updated in the shrink state as well, where we're having it rotate too. If I hit play, we can see that everything behaves just as it was before. It rotates at a value of 1 on the y-axis. And if I hit the spacebar, it continues to rotate at that same speed. And I let go. Everything's working the same as it was before, but we've just replaced that number with an actual working variable. So now what I want to do is make a setup here with the events so that when I press specific buttons, the speed will go up and down. So it'll add and subtract from this new variable that we made, and it should update everything all at once. I'm going to want 2 new events. So I'm going to go back to the event tab. These are going to trigger whenever I hit the plus and minus key on the keyboard. That's how I'm going to control the speed, is just with the plus and minus, I decided. So I'm going to add events here. Let's just say add, or I'm going to do it this way, speed add and speed subtract. And just as before, I'm going to right click on the rotate state here, add transition, and add these new events to the state. So speed add, speed subtract. I'm also going to collapse these because I'm going to add new actions here that'll trigger these events. So for speed add, I want to add a new get key down action. So let's go back in here. Get key, and I click get key down. And at this point, I'm just going to mention, because we're getting kind of busy in here, you can also rename these. So we have get key down, get key down, get key down. It's going to get kind of confusing. So get key down, I'm going to write in parentheses here, S. And that's just by double clicking the title, and this is space. And it's nice to keep organized. You can really get a lot of actions in these states pretty quickly. So it's nice to keep things organized, or at least readable, so that when you come back to the project, you know what's happening. And so now this new one, I'm going to double click here, and I'm just going to type in, I guess I'm just going to use the plus key, or I guess it's the equals key. Hold on, there is a plus key on the keyboard. We're going to use the numpad plus and minus, and that'll control the speed. So I'm going to do that. And I believe we can find that key. I'm going to have to dig through here. Here it is. Keypad plus is the one I'm going to use. That's what this key is, as opposed to using the one next to the backspace key. And that's going to send speed add. And now I'm just going to copy this, copy select action, and paste action. And this is going to be the minus key. Let's see, keypad minus, there it is. And this is going to send the event speed subtract. So that should be all set up. When I hit those buttons, it'll send these events. Doesn't have anywhere to go just yet, but I'm going to hold down Control, click on my event, and drag it out to create a new state. And I'm going to do that for both of these. I'm going to rename them speed add, speed subtract. So now I have this new little section over here that's going to control the speed. So let's just start with speed add. What's going to happen when we enter this state is it's going to look for our variable that we created, this float y-axis variable, and it's going to add to it. So all we have to do is go up into the action browser and look for add. And in the math somewhere, we have float add, and this is going to add a value to our float. That's basically all we're doing. We're just doing a little math equation every time we go into this state. So I'm going to go back to the state, click in the empty space, double click float add, and then it's going to ask which float variable are you adding to, and it's going to be our new one that we made. And how much? I'm just going to add 0.5 because I guess we can add 1. We're going to go up and down by 1, and so that should be easier to see anyway when we do that, when we press those buttons. And when it's done doing that, it's going to get stuck in this state unless we have a way to get back here. And there's already an event created by default in every FSM that we can use, and it's called the finished event. And we can get to it by right-clicking, add transition. You might have already seen it. It's this one all in caps, finished. And what that does is it'll always send when everything in the state has been accomplished. We just have this one action that's going to be adding to the float. And when that's finished, it's going to send this event to wherever we point it to. So I'm going to click and drag back to rotate. And now we're going to do the same thing for the speed subtract. I'm going to go up here and we can search for subtract. Our variable that we're going to be subtracting from is our float variable. We're going to subtract 1. And then when it's done, we're just going to finish the state and go back to rotate. So it's just going to be a key press. It's just going to jump over here and finish and jump right back. And so, yeah, that should be it. Let's test it out. I'm going to hit play. We're in our rotate state. We can still do our shrink and back. We can still stop and go back, do all these things. And then now we should be able to make it go faster. I'm going to hit the plus key. See how it just jumped over to the speed add? And now it's just adding speed. It's getting faster and faster and faster. And now when I hit the minus key, we're going to go back down. We can even go in reverse because it's going all the way down. And I can actually show you what it's doing if we go over to the variables tab again, and we have the float, our new float variable selected. We can actually see that while I press the plus and minus button, that value in the float is changing. And as it changes, if I click over into the state tab, you can see underneath the rotate action that that value is updating here as well, because we've specified it as the variable. I feel like that's a good bit of the basics and the fundamentals covered just to get you started with working in PlayMaker. I think a lot of it from here is going to be a lot of experimentation and practice and research to really get proficient with the software. Like I said, it took me a couple months before I started feeling comfortable and was able to just kind of act freely in the software. But it all comes with your own practice, and I don't think that's something I can really give you in a tutorial. But with this, I think those are the fundamental things, and from here you can just start exploring. And I also wanted to share one other thing. I just wanted to bring up this. This is just the PlayMaker forums. I'm always dipping my toes in here while I'm working, even now. Like I'll come back in here. There's a search bar. If you have a problem with something, you can just come up here and search for it and see. Most likely someone has been posting about the same problem that you had. And there'll be links, and everyone's very helpful in here. I definitely recommend you bookmarking this, creating an account, and at least browsing through here if you have issues before giving up, because there's always people who have run into a similar, if not the same problem as you had before. And I don't know, that's just part of the growing pains of learning new software is you'll hit a barrier and you just got to push through it, do a little bit of research. I also recommend just going on YouTube and looking for PlayMaker tutorials. In fact, there's actually a tutorial section up here. And I'm sure there's some nice getting started tutorials in here as well. So yeah, definitely utilize these resources. I think that's important for learning any software as you learn PlayMaker. So if you thought that looked interesting, if that kind of made sense to you, maybe PlayMaker is for you and you can get started. It is a paid plugin, but I definitely think it's worth it. I mean, you pay once and you have this thing forever. That's why I'm still using it now. And it's allowed me to do all these crazy things that I almost can't believe that I'm able to do. Like some of it I shouldn't have been able to do, but because of the help that people provide online and all the resources that are there online, PlayMaker really clicked for me. And if you're in a similar situation, it might do the same for you. I also want to close by saying if you do end up trying PlayMaker out, you can consider me a resource as well. If you want to message me, if you hit a barrier or something, or having trouble with something, or just want to talk about it. I have years of experience with it, and I feel pretty proficient and capable of answering questions. So if you want to send me a message, or if I have time and you want to do like a video chat or a screen sharing thing or something, just let me know. And yeah, we can figure it out. So hopefully this helped out. Appreciate you watching. Good luck with your game developer adventure, and I'll see you around.